As you may know, this week I've been in a mission to the Middle East, starting with Lebanon, Syria, West Bank, Gaza. This has been a very intense week in a special context, as you know, when new leadership in Lebanon, new regime in Syria, and the ceasefire in Gaza is opening opportunities and responsibilities for all of us. In the interest of time, I would focus just in Gaza, but of course I will be available to answer to any question about Gaza, but also about the other points on the mission. As I mentioned, just came from Gaza, spent a day in Gaza, and unfortunately the humanitarian catastrophe that Gazans face continues. And as the uncertainties mount, we need to focus all efforts on avoiding a return to war, which would be an absolute tragedy. And I reiterate the call for a permanent ceasefire and the release of all hostages without delay. The ceasefire has offered a much-needed respite, but there is simply no time to lose. Our hope has been that the ceasefire creates the conditions to ensure rapid, unhindered, and safe humanitarian access to provide relief for all. UNOPS, as you know, UNOPS is the UN agency focused on infrastructure, procurement, project management. We are present in 100 countries, 6,000 personnel. We stand ready to support implementation of the ceasefire deal and scale up the delivery of sustained humanitarian relief. We reiterate the call for a permanent ceasefire and the release of hostages without delay. My colleagues have been on the ground in Gaza from day one, my team, working to support the broader humanitarian operations in Gaza. Our response includes many aspects, but mainly three, if I may, which is our work on procurement, delivery and monitoring, and lately the distribution of fuel. Also, our work to manage the operation of the so-called UN 2720 mechanism. So the mechanism that was created from the Security Council resolution, which aims to increase and speed up the delivery of life-saving humanitarian assistance to Gaza. So UNOPS has been managing and implementing the mechanism in coordination with SIGRID-CAC. And our work together with UN Mine Action to mitigate the dangers of landmines and unexploded ordnance. On fuel, my colleagues on the ground have played a unique role, and the good news is that before the ceasefire, we were providing on average 100,000 liters per day of fuel, and now we are providing and distributing 1.3 million liters per day, which confirms, as we always said, that once the political conditions and once the security conditions would allow, we would be able to scale up and to speed up delivery. This provision of fuel, as you know, it's critical in the absence of other sources of energy, because unfortunately today Gaza has no connections on electricity. Almost all solar panels are destroyed. Only fuel remains as the lifeline element. And this is critical for hospitals, for schools, for bakeries, for houses. And that's why scaling the capacity on fuel represents a breakthrough. This work, as I mentioned, is usually significant. And of course, I remain available. I'm available in the Q&A to focus more on this. In parallel, we also manage, as I mentioned, the UN 2720 mechanism, which aims to expedite, streamline, and accelerate the process of providing assistance to Gaza and help ensure that aid continues to reach its civilian destination. On behalf of the UN system, we also coordinate and manage the access through the Access Support Unit. So let me share just 2 or 3 data points on the mechanism. First, this mechanism, as of 13th February, has facilitated close to 78,000 metric tons of aid being delivered in Gaza. And most importantly, 70% of all approvals of consignments have been done in less than 24 hours. So the mechanism provided more transparency, accountability, predictability, and efficiency, which obviously was critical. But as we always said, the issue was never from a logistic point of view. The issue was political. It was the lack of political will. And that's why the ceasefire has created the conditions, as we have seen in the last 3 weeks, to bring more aid and to ensure that the aid could reach those most in need. Finally, on mine action, we, in partnership with UN Mine Action, we mitigate the dangers of landmines and unexploded ordnance. As you imagine, this is particularly important in Gaza. An estimated 40 million tons of debris and rubble generated by the conflict will take years to remove. Today, in my visit, I was astonished, very impressed with the scale of devastation. And I've seen the footage, we have seen the footage, but there is nothing like seeing that directly. I've been in Gaza 1 year ago, and now again, I can see the scale of destruction, and particularly the impact on rubble. Gaza is flooded, surrounded by rubble. 40 to 50 million tons of rubble. And this rubble includes, unfortunately, human remains. It includes, unfortunately, unexploded ordnance. So we are dealing not just with rubble. We are dealing with obviously a very complex situation. To date, on this activity to mitigate explosive device risks, we have been working, supporting the convoys, the UN convoys through Gaza. Our officers conduct threat and risk assessments across Gaza, enabling critical humanitarian aid convoys and activities. To date, our team has completed almost 400 assessments and accompanied 400 high-risk convoys to vulnerable areas potentially contaminated. Finally, my final comment, and then of course I'll be glad to answer to questions, is that from what I've seen today, it's critical to move as soon as possible to the early recovery, because the scale of devastation, particularly on infrastructure, is very impressive. You have 70% of all infrastructure destroyed, 60% of all houses destroyed, 65% of all roads destroyed. This represents around $30 billion of cost. People have no place to go. So the houses are destroyed. They are moving from one place to the other, and they don't have the number of shelters that is needed. Tents are not a longer-term solution. So I think it's really important that we take the opportunity that the ceasefire has created to bring all humanitarian aid, but also create the conditions as soon as possible to early recovery and reconstruction. Thank you.